Now on Indianapolis This Week.
I regret the confusion here.
Just in is out. The governor scraps a plan for a new state news agency after a firestorm of controversy around the country. Stopping the flu epidemic. Has Indiana turned the corner in the fight against the virus after the highest death toll in 10 years? And hoping to make a change in leadership in Carmel, we talk to the man trying to unseat longtime Mayor Jim Brainerd.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. We begin with the fight to stop the deadly spread of the flu virus in Indiana. In fact, the number of flu deaths has now topped 100 in our state. The State Department of Health lists 108 deaths directly related to the flu virus in Indiana. 93 of those have been people over the age of 65. Marion County has 13 deaths, Hamilton County 6. I talked with State Health Commissioner Jerome Adams about the state's effort to prevent the spread of the flu.
It's interesting because the fear is misplaced in many ways, and part of my job as the health commissioner is to help people understand what those statistics mean. And what do they mean this year? It means we're having a worse than usual flu season. It means people need to take it seriously. They need to get vaccinated. They need to take proper precautions, hand washing, alcohol-based sanitizer. And if you're sick, for goodness sake, stay at home, call your doctor, talk to your doctor about antiviral medications.
One of the things that sort of caught my attention is that the number of people that died from the flu they were elderly people, and we know that usually that the elderly are very susceptible, like young children. What can we do for that population? What do we need to do to make sure that grandma and grandpa are protected?
Well, that's another wonderful question, because young people tend not to get the flu shot because they think they're invincible. But getting the flu shot helps protect the people in your life who are vulnerable, whether it's grandma, grandpa, and another at-risk group of people who are under 5. We had our first pediatric death just occur, unfortunately. And so we encourage everyone to get the flu shot. That's the most important thing you can do. And if you're sick, don't go around them. Don't bring the flu around them.
What do you say to those folks that say, look, if I get a shot, it's going to make me sick, or I'm anti-medicines. In fact, medicines may cause autism or something like that. How do you get over that hump? Because that is a serious movement in our state and country. How do you get over that?
That's definitely an obstacle. I will say unequivocally that the evidence shows that vaccines are not linked to autism. And as far as side effects, that is a fair thing for people to say, but I'd rather have a day's worth of side effects for the few people that does occur in than to have myself or one of my loved ones end up in the hospital or worse.
Dr. Jerome Adams, Indiana State Health Commissioner, thank you so much. I hope you'll return anytime. The door is always open.
Thank you so much.
Making news on Indianapolis This Week is the new public safety tax meant to fund the hiring of new police officers. That new tax went into effect on January the 1st. It's supposed to raise about $16 million. The mayor has already announced the hiring of 115 officers. Joining us now is the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 86, Rick Snyder. Rick, welcome to the program. The money that's going to be used for this tax, is it going to go to the officers? Already some concern that the money may be shifted to other things.
Sure. Now that we have the tax in place and the revenues are starting to come in, we now have a balanced amount that we have to work with. And of that, the mayor has increased the projected number of officers to be hired in 2015 from 90 officers to 115. Our position is that we can actually hire and train more, and we should do so that we can front load the number of officers and help start addressing the crisis of crime in our city.
But are you concerned at all that this tax, which is sold to the public and which on this program you predicted would pass, and I even questioned you saying, Rick, it's not going to pass, but it did pass, so congratulations on that. Are you concerned at all that at a time when you went to the public and said this money is only meant for police, that there's now talk that it may be spent on other things?
Sure. So that's always the concern, and with it being a public safety tax, those are restricted dollars that must be spent in that manner. A portion of that is directed to go to the IMPD. However, some have suggested that the balance of the funds not used for hiring officers should be reallocated to the Fiscal Stability Fund. We just simply disagree with that. We think that we should invest those dollars in capital improvement needs within the police department to help sustain all those officers that we're planning to hire over the next 5 years.
Is that a slap in the face of the public who they hear about using that money for something that is not for manpower, women power, for Indianapolis's finest. Is that a betrayal of trust then, if money is not going for what it was intended to?
Sure, that would be the concern, that if it went to the Fiscal Stability Fund, it would then become unrestricted funds, and therefore it could be spent on other things. Again, we disagree with that. We've spent a lot of time with taxpayers and citizens, and I'm quite confident that they would be personally offended if that were to occur. So we're in the process of working with counselors on both sides of the aisle to ensure that those dollars will remain with IMPD and go not only for the officers, but purchasing additional vehicles that we need for our fleet, as well as improving our training academy so that we can better get those officers through the process to get them out onto the streets.
There is a push to hire more officers, but do we have the pool of people, right? In this rush to put more men and women on the street, are there people out there that can fill these jobs, or are we rushing to fill the positions?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of people even wonder, would anyone want to apply for this job given the current environment of the policing profession?
Well, listen, I'm not questioning that because I believe that the Indianapolis Police Department has the greatest in the country, right? But what I'm asking you is, do we have enough people out there in America that are qualified to fill all these jobs when everyone wants more police?
Yeah, absolutely we do. And what we found in our last hiring process, where we hired 80 officers total last year, we had nearly 3,000 people who applied for those positions. So there's a great depth of a candidate pool out there. However, it remains a highly selective process. And what's good for us is that we can, even while hiring large numbers of officers, we have processes in place to ensure that we don't lower standards, that we don't shortcut our training, and that we invest in those people as we run them through that process to get them out there to serve our city.
Are you confident then that this public safety tax, when we come back and meet in a couple of months, will be there just for police and not for other projects?
Based on getting the public safety tax passed and watching politics be set aside in a bipartisan effort completed last year, I'm confident that our council and our mayor can do that this year with the support of our department administrators as well as the FOP.
So you were right the first time. I hope that when you come back you can say that you were right twice in a row. Yes?
We hope so too, for the sake of our community.
Rick Snyder, thank you so much. Come back anytime.
Thank you.
When we return, and coming up on Indianapolis This Week, he's been on the Carmel City Council for 10 years, and now he's ready to try to unseat longtime Mayor Jim Brainerd. Rick Sharp joins us next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We now turn to Democracy 2015, our coverage of the municipal elections across Indiana, and this year where voters will select mayors and for cities around the state. One of those is Carmel, where just this week, Council President Rick Sharp announced he will challenge Mayor Jim Brainerd in the Republican mayoral primary. Sharp has been part of the council for 10 years and hopes to prevent Brainerd from getting a 6th term as Carmel mayor. We are now joined by Mr. Rick Sharp. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Why are you an option to the current incumbent?
I think because of my business experience. I've been in the business world for 30 plus years. I've worked in both the corporate side for big corporations across the country, and I've also worked for run a family business. I know what it's like to make a payroll, and I know what it's like to be able to make your debt payments, to be able to manage yourself responsibly. And I think Carmel has reached a point of maturity that what we need now is effective, solid management rather than just a visionary. And Mayor Brainerd has been a great visionary. He's done wonders for developing Carmel into what it is today. But I think that the decisions he's made fiscally over the last several years in particular indicate that it's time for a change.
The electorate has voted for him a number of times, as you know.
Yes.
And as far as we can tell by the numbers, he's very popular there.
Yes.
So how do you run against that record without sounding like a naysayer or someone who's against the city that he loves?
Well, first of all, I do just what I said a moment ago. I give props where they're due to the mayor for what he has accomplished in the city. Secondly, I don't intend to run a negative campaign. This isn't a campaign against Jim Brainerd. It's a campaign for Carmel and for Carmel's future.
So what are the issues then for you in a city that is growing, one of the most affluent cities in our state, one which great schools, the Palladium, fine arts? What is it about Carmel where everyone believes all is well needs to change?
First, for me, would be fiscal priorities. I think that we need to be more transparent in the operations of our government, and there have been far too many stories about Carmel that point to the fact that we talk transparency a lot, but we're not. The people should be able to see clearly where their money's going and how policy decisions are arrived at.
In what areas? What would you like the voters in Carmel to see? What specific accounts? What specific projects?
The operation of the Carmel Redevelopment Commission would be the first one I would go to. There's been a great effort to put a spin on the situation of their debt versus their income. I'd like to remove the spin and just deal with the facts. The fact of the matter is that by their own numbers, they fall short some $43 million in tax revenue to repay their debt. Now, there's some fancy accounting for how we can make it look like things are good. And in fact, the problems don't really occur until you get out about 15 years. But, and I think it's a difference in philosophy between Mr. Brainerd and myself, I believe that we owe a debt of good governance to people who'll be living in Carmel 15 years from now, just as much as we owe a debt to the people that are living in Carmel today. So I don't want to take policy decisions that we know are creating a difficulty for the next generation of people living in Carmel.
This mayor has been able to attract some jobs to your city, but at the same time you have some of the lowest property taxes, but you don't really have that large of an economic base. Will you have to attract more corporations to maintain a low property tax for a city that keeps growing and growing and growing? I mean, at some point, either taxes have to go up or you have to bring in more people to tax.
Right. Well, first of all, yes, economic development would be at the forefront of a sharp administration, but I would approach it differently than the mayor. The city currently spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on public relations specialists, and I admit and acknowledge that PR is certainly a part of economic development, but I think what I would do is I would target an industry sector, and I would hire a professional, devise a marketing plan, and go right at that sector. I'd also do economic development in our arts and design district, a bit different than the mayor. We've tried the arts galleries. It was a good experiment, and it's worked to some degree, but I don't think as much as he had hoped or we had hoped. I think we ought to target a restaurant district like you would find, say, in Buckhead, Atlanta.
Or Broad Ripple.
Or Broad Ripple.
Sort of.
Broad Ripple.
Or
Broad
Mass
Ripple,
Avenue.
I think Mass Avenue, I think would be a closer comparison. You know, the thing is that if we bring in more corporations, they bring us tax dollars, they put a low demand on services, and that's the secret that's helped Carmel keep its residential property tax rate so low.
Rick Sharp, thank you so much for joining us. Candidate for mayor of Carmel, please come back. We'll be following the race. Of course, the incumbent had this to say. Mayor Jim Brainerd issued this statement via Facebook this week, saying in his words, "We are going to campaign on our record. Carmel residents enjoy the lowest taxes of any major city in the state. An awful lot of people in Carmel are paying less in property taxes today on their homes than they were 20 years ago. That has taken a lot of tough management through several recessions. That is a record I am proud of." We look forward to the mayor joining our program at a later date. Coming up next, just in, taken out of consideration after an enormous backlash to the idea of a state-run media service. We have reaction, plus our insiders jump into the debate next on Indianapolis This Week. Time to talk now about that story that has brought Indiana national attention this week and ridicule from many. We're talking about the plans for Just In, which broke Monday night on the Indianapolis Star as a state-run news agency. Internal documents touted that as a news service and used phrases like top stories, editorial board, and exclusive content designed to scoop other media. By Wednesday, Governor Pence was essentially blaming poor staff work on this issue.
I frankly learned about the memo from press reports on late Monday. I frankly had never seen it. And, you know, using terms like news service, phrases like a news outlet, it's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate to describe the objectives of a clearinghouse website of press releases with news-related terms. I regret the confusion here.
Then Thursday afternoon, Governor Pence pulled the plug completely on Just In, telling state agencies to use the website that's already in operation. It's a decision that brought quick approval from both sides of the aisle.
A free and independent press is critical, and I don't think Governor Pence intended to circumvent that at all, although it certainly didn't look good the way it was presented.
There's no need for the state to be involved in this kind of thing. You know, our money needs to be spent on trying to make sure that every dollar is wisely used, that it's spent on things like pre-K instead of a state-run news media. We don't need to be self-congratulating. We just need to work hard.
And this roundtable is ready to talk. We welcome in now our political insiders, Mary Beth Schneider, longtime Indianapolis Star political reporter. They're laughing already. Democrat Laura Beck, and Abdul Hakim Shabazz with IndyPolitics.org. Mary Beth, let me start with you because you are our Twitter queen. And when you heard about this
on Twitter,
this thing blew up. I had to put down my phone.
My head blew up. Right away. I mean, it had so many things so wrong with it. They were describing it as a news organization in its own right. They would have an editorial board, a managing editor, and it just, if he did not know about it, then he should have. And what kind of staff work was it that would not let the governor know of this kind of major change?
Major blunder, Abdul?
Major blunder for a minor crisis. The line I wrote in my column when I wrote about this was a tempest in a teaspoon. Because if you take a step back from the histrionics, take a step back, look at what they were trying to do is basically what the White House does in the little website they have called the briefing room, where the White House sends all its news releases, where it sends all its video, where it sends all its audio. Now, where my friends in the governor's office made a mistake, were using news and journalistic terms to describe what they were doing. Because you don't use, instead of using like private exclusive content, no, you should have said unique content. Instead of breaking news, you should have said things that may not necessarily get picked up by other places. The state of Illinois does this, Ohio does this. This is done in basically every other state where they have websites, which are clearinghouses for information. Poor execution, no one will not concede that. But to say this is Pravda on the prairie, if I may quote my Russian Bozha Moi, you got to be kidding me.
Well, I mean, even Speaker Bosma was making Russian references to this. And I have to say, I've tried really hard, but I'm fairly certain I rolled my eyes at least 4 times at him while he was talking. And now I'm trying to hold his hand as we're standing here. What I found so interesting is having a background in political communications, which is what I've so far fallen into for my career, is that when you work for an elected official, their authenticity is really their brand. And I think that this is now added to the narrative of who Mike Pence is and what he is all about. I think you can diss the staff as much as you want to, but at the same time, the orders and the directives come from the top. And there seems to be a real paranoid obsession with controlling out of this governor's office. And I think that comes from Governor Pence, controlling the image, controlling the message. But when you are so controlling, they ended up losing control over probably the single most important policy announcement they've made to date and may make to date.
They stepped all over their own Medicaid announcement.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Bill Clinton $200 haircut. You know, remember when he was on the tarmac and, you know, he's getting the big haircut and things like that. This is just going to be added to that narrative of him.
So what's the fallout then? I mean, is this something that he's cleaned up? We'll forget about it in the next news cycle.
The fallout will be none. Is what the fallout will be.
So we're going to forget about this.
Yes, because us media people, we get all worked up because you got a lot of people in news places where elected officials are looking to look for different ways.
Is that the case?
I disagree. Well, first off, I think that it will not necessarily get forgotten because nothing gets forgotten in politics anymore. And every time he runs for something in any kind of communication initiative, this will be part of the narrative. Also, while you're calling it a tempest in a teapot, that means it's a major blunder. But secondly, I don't think it was all that insignificant. When they put out, what was it, 19-page memo to describe a better website, it's more than a better website.
But I actually read the memo and the 19 pages.
I read the memo
and looking through it is basically, and having been a government spokesperson before,
$100,000 went into that 19-page
during my days as the Illinois Attorney General, what they did is basically, poor wording, yes, but to say that this is Pravda and this is TASS, this is not Pravda.
Here's the other element, though.
You say it's poor wording, but this is an office, the communications office for the governor, that knows how to handle the press. So words mean something, and I'm just wondering.
I don't think they do know how to handle the press. I think they have had actually poor press relations, and that actually fed some of this response.
Why didn't someone say in that office? Why didn't someone say this does not sound right?
Somebody, and I'll be the first person to admit. And when I had conversations with folks in the governor's office, like, what the heck were you guys thinking using these words? And they will admit, Abdul, poor choice of words on our part. But once again, they weren't communicating with the press; they were communicating internally and with each other.
The other fallout, though, I think that this has is a larger fallout on the Pence administration's relationship with the press. It clearly has been fractured, and that was exposed with the, as it was quoted, surreal press conference that occurred. But the other thing it does, though, too, not to interrupt you, is one of the underlying themes in that memo, the 19-page memo I read, was that this is to help smaller newspapers. It was a real dig at these smaller newspapers and smaller publications that do a darn good job in their community of covering issues. And it was also kind of a dig at these really talented press people who work for these different state agencies, because it's almost like they're trying to limit their exposure with the
Mary
press.
Beth, you get the last word on this before we head out. I mean, this was really a bad idea.
It was really a bad idea, and it's a shame that he did not pull the plug on it on day one.
And we really think the governor had no idea about this is something.
I mean, the intricacies have probably said, Governor, we're going to be updating the state information website. Okay, because anybody who's ever used the state's website, like I do on a daily basis, it is horrible.
And the people that they hired, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to keep them, you think?
I have no idea.
Nobody's getting fired over this. I'll tell you that right now.
But they hired some people, so what happens to those people? Right?
I don't know. One is Bill McCleary, formerly with the Indianapolis Star. I wish him well.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll continue to follow it. The conversation between our insiders, and they were excited today, continues on Twitter. Check out their Twitter handles and give us your opinion, and stay up to date with Mary Beth, Lara, Abdul, Dan, and Jennifer throughout the week. Indianapolis This Week continues after the break. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. As we mark Black History Month, we invite you to explore a section dedicated to the celebration on our website, theindychannel.com. You'll find stories about local groups working to make our city much better. Just go to the Hot Button section at the top of our homepage. And next Sunday, I sit down with Sarah Collins Rudolph. She was the only one of 5 little girls to survive the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama, a church where Martin Luther King Jr. often visited. My one-on-one with Collins Rudolph at the Madam Walker Theater next Sunday in our Sunday Spotlight. Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. We'll also continue to track the snow hitting central Indiana throughout the day on the RTV6 app and our website, theindychannel.com. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you next week.